How we doing, everybody? Good. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Jake. I normally teach at downtown, and it's good to be with you all this morning. Today we are going to be in Colossians, and so, naturally, before we get into that, if you want to open your Bibles, we'll be in Genesis 1 for a second, all right? This is one of those things where I taught this at downtown, and I told everyone, it was like, you're probably not going to like what Colossians says, so I got to do some homework to help you understand what the Bible is talking about before I help you see what this passage is talking about and why you actually want it. So, Genesis 1, we're going to start that. If you want to open your Bibles, we'll start in verse 26. Genesis 1:26 reads this: Then God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth." So we see here, page 1 of the Bible, God has this vision for all of creation to know him and to love him, for his whole world to be filled with his presence and his goodness and his love. And the primary way he intends to make that happen is by creating human beings, image bearers. It says male and female. And not only that, he creates a family unit, male, female. Adam and Eve, they are married together. And so the primary means by which God intends to give his blessing throughout all of creation is through this family unit. And two things I want to pull out here. First of all, is that male and female, Adam and Eve, they are equal and distinct here. So they're equal. They are both image bearers created by God, and they each have their own distinctive roles to play. Genesis 1-3, it tells us that the man, Adam, his call is to work and to keep the garden. Those words, work and keep, are the Hebrew words aved and shamar. And what's interesting is whenever you see those words grouped up together again in the Old Testament, it's talking about the priesthood in the temple of God. These people, the Levitical priests, they were God-given designators. It was God-given responsibility to these people to lead the family of God, to teach them the word of God. These people were held responsible for how they were leading the family of God. And in the same way, when it says that Adam is to work and to keep, it's the same idea. His job is to lead, to teach his family the word of God. He's going to be the point person. He's going to be responsible for how he's doing, leading the family of God to help accomplish God's vision for creation. And then you have the female. It says elsewhere in Genesis 2-3 that she's like an azer. That word azer means strength and power. It's this idea. Elsewhere in the Old Testament, that word azer is used to describe salvation or rescue. This idea that you are powerless without an azer. You can't accomplish the vision of God without an azer. We see elsewhere she's taken from the rib of Adam. That word rib is the Hebrew word salah, and it's an architectural word. It's like a support beam in a house where it's like, we have one of those in our house, like this big support beam. And if you were to remove that thing, the whole building would come crashing down. And it's like that way with the wife here. She is supposed to be a salah, this support beam, if you will, that it's like if she is not there, this whole vision, the whole mission of God comes crashing down. And so you have these two working together, complementing each other as image bearers of God to accomplish the vision of God. And in verse 28, it says they're to start a family. They're to have kids who are also image bearers who will fill the planet with God's goodness and love to cover the planet. It's this idea, the husband and wife, they're on the same team. Genesis 2 says the man will leave his father and mother. The two will become one flesh. They're on the same team together to accomplish the mission and vision of God. They're to have kids who will be on the same team with them to accomplish the vision and mission of God, to bring the garden into the world. And while this was the goal for the family unit, sin quickly makes it all go wrong. Genesis 3, we see Eve eats the fruit. She usurps her power. She's supposed to be the source of power and strength for her family, but she uses her power and strength for herself. But the man's not off the hook either, okay? Adam's supposed to lead and teach his family, and he's quiet and doesn't say anything. And in fact, when God calls them out in Genesis 3, who's he call out first? He calls out Adam. It's like, where are you, man? You're supposed to be leading and teaching your family. And he calls him out on that. And ever since then, from Genesis 3 onwards, marriage and family at large go off the rails. God had this beautiful design for what they are supposed to do in the world. But because of sin entering the human heart, sin has now impacted every family from here on out outside of the garden. And so now there's family breakdown and broken marriages, and it's nowhere near what God has envisioned for us. So there's family breakdown everywhere you go. In fact, when you see families in the Old Testament, you often see like wives treating husbands and husbands treating wives wickedly. You have children going behind their parents' back to do things. And it's not like the Old Testament is trying to highlight, like, look how great the things they're doing are. It's to highlight the fact that we've gone so wrong from what we were supposed to be in Genesis 1. And so because of sin, it's not only impacted every individual, but it's impacted every society, every culture, every family unit from here on out. And the beauty of what Jesus is doing through his life and death and resurrection is he is in the process of not only remaking all of us, he is in the process of remaking our homes. Amen? So when you get to the Apostle Paul and he's writing to the Roman Empire, there's family breakdown here as well. Just like there's family breakdown in every society. Sin has impacted every family unit, so it's impacted the family units in the Roman Empire. To give you a snapshot, in the Roman world, wives and children and servants were all kind of lumped together and viewed as property of the husband. And the primary value of that time was power. And power led to all sorts of family disintegration and breakdown, where instead of the husband being passive, like we saw Adam do in Genesis 3, they've gone so far in the opposite direction that it's equally destructive, where they're tyrants in the home now. And likewise with wives, where the wife was the usurper in Genesis 3, using her own power for her own selfish gain. It's gone so far the other way that it's also a distortion of what God had in mind in the garden, to where now she's almost treated like a doormat. Power is now this value that has led to family disintegration in the home. The husband is essentially the king of his own little empire. Women have no voice in the home. Women are subjected to the will of their husband. And if they don't follow suit, they could risk the husband abandoning them or divorcing them. And if you're a woman at that time, you really don't have a lot of options to provide for yourself outside of getting married. And so wives lived under the fear of following their husbands, doing whatever they say, lest they get thrown out into the street. So not only did they have no voice in the home, they had no voice in politics, no voice in decision-making, no voice in getting an education for themselves. On top of that, you had children, and they were considered to be less than in the home. It was believed, because of like a high infant mortality rate, that kids didn't even have souls until they were like 1 or 2. And because power was like such this dominant idea, this dominant value, it was really on the parents to like toughen their kids up and make them as strong and as powerful as possible. And so you have in the history books, you have like parents subjecting their kids to like ice cold baths when they're babies and toddlers to toughen them up. You have them getting flogged out in the street to give them shame and ridicule so that they would follow suit and get toughened up. And man, you don't have to imagine that hard to see how power is so destructive for the home. How it goes really bad for the women and the children in the home, but it goes bad for the men as well. I mean, can you imagine? It doesn't take much to imagine how easy it becomes if men are given unlimited power in the home to do whatever they want, how destructive it is for their soul, not only for their family. So my point is, when you get to the church in Colossians, the family picture is a far cry from what they were supposed to be in Genesis 1. So all that background in mind, Paul's going to offer some corrective. He's going to subvert the family expectations. He's going to step on some toes. He's going to call some people out in this passage. Colossians 3:18 says, "Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives, and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord." And all the parents said, amen? Fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. Now, two things I want to highlight before we start picking this apart. Let me tell you what Paul is not saying here, because I think it's pretty critical in understanding this passage. Paul is not saying when it comes to family life and how you parent and marriage life and all of that, what he's not saying is, y'all are good. No notes here. Keep on doing what you're doing. And I say that feels really obvious. Like, of course he's not saying that. But let me tell you, a lot of people, especially people with Bible degrees, will make that argument and say, when it comes to the stuff of Paul, he said a lot of good things, but then there's stuff like a passage like this where he just really reveals how out of date and out of touch with the times he is. So you can accept a lot of things, but stuff like this, man, look, Paul was the sexist, so let's just ignore what he's saying. And I just want to clear the air and say that's not what he's doing at all. Because what he's been doing this entire letter in Colossians is how we need to reject the way of the world, we need to reject Rome and look more like the kingdom of heaven. So when it comes to the stuff he said earlier, when it comes to teachings y'all are believing, man, that's the stuff of Rome and the world. Reject that and rather embrace the teachings of Jesus and understand what the kingdom of heaven is about. When it comes to earlier in Colossians 3 and put off and put on, he's saying, look, put off the way of the world, the way of Rome. That's how you used to live, but your identity is with King Jesus now. So put on that identity and step into that because that's who you are. And he's saying the same thing when it comes to living in the household, marriage and family and parenting. He's saying reject the way of Rome, and this is how you bring the kingdom of heaven into your household. So I just want to be really clear. This is all just part of his thought in the entire letter. He's not breaking away and saying, but when it comes to this topic, man, I have no notes, no correction whatsoever. Rather, he's stepping on some toes when he's saying this because this was the norm in the Roman Empire. And I'm imagining if it's the church in Colossians and they're reading this letter from Paul for the first time and they get to this stuff, there would have been crickets in the room. And some people would have been looking at each other like, yo, I think he's talking about you. I don't know, man. But second, and this is really beautiful, and I don't want to gloss over this. Notice this is Paul, who is a single man, talking to married couples about how to live into this. I don't want to miss that because that's beautiful. Paul, who is not in the same season of life, is able to lovingly challenge and instruct people in a different season of life than him. And I think that says something pretty beautiful about church family. It's not like we silo each other off, marrieds in one camp, singles in another camp, different age groups, all kind of siloed off, but rather we are the family of God and we're to be living life together, doing life together, helping each other, speak into and correct and encourage all of us in the family of God to follow him more closely. It's singles, it's marrieds, it's people in different seasons of life speaking into each other because we're all in this together. Singles, you have a role to play in the lives of married couples in our church. And married couples, you have a role to play in the lives of singles. And if you need any more proof of that, look at Jesus, who was single and still had a lot to say about marriage and family, okay? So let's take a minute. Let's unpack what's being said here. Colossians 3:18. I'll read that for us again. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Paul is essentially instilling this Genesis 1 idea that everyone is on the same team. Husbands, wives, kids, all image bearers of him, all of equal value, pulling in the same direction to bring the kingdom of heaven here into the home. So husbands, love your wives, lead your wives. Ephesians 5 says the same things. As Jesus loved the church and died for her, so you, husbands, should love your wives and die to yourselves and step into what God has called you to fix what Adam did wrong in the garden. Take responsibility for your family. Lead your family. Teach God's word to your family. Wives, in the same way, Paul is calling them back to Genesis 1. You have this strength. You have this power as an heir. Submit to your husband so that you can go in the same direction. And yes, I acknowledge when I say that word submit, it comes with a lot of cultural baggage. And man, I could just when I taught this at downtown 30 minutes ago, I could just feel the whole room against me. So let me just back up. Let me just say, I know y'all are. Let me just say, that word comes with a lot of baggage. But in the Bible, when you look at that word submission, it never implies weakness. It never implies inferiority. It never implies less than. And yet, submission, when you look at the Bible, it means putting your strength under the right conditions. It's using what God has given you as an heir to strengthen the direction for your family. In the same way, the New Testament, when it talks about God the Son submitting to God the Father, God the Spirit submitting to God the Son, all with their roles to play, yet never once in the Trinity does that imply inferiority or less than, because the moment you think submission in the Trinity means less than, you're denying the bedrock of Christianity. So if you would not say that about the Trinity, why would you say that about wives and husbands? All right? So Paul's making it real clear between submission is not defined how culture defines it. It's defined by the work of Jesus. Colossians 3:18 says, as is fitting to the Lord, submission is in some small way a picture of the triune love within the Godhead. And I feel like I could just spend a lot of time saying what this word does not mean, but I just want to be real quick. Women are not to submit to all men. The wife submits to her husband, who in turn, the husband is submitting himself to Jesus. And they're working together as a team, all pointing back to Genesis 1, turning the whole concept of roles in the household according to the Roman Empire, just subverting all of that and turning it on its head. Husbands and wives, they are of equal authority and value, all while complementing each other to go in the same direction, to bring the mission and vision of God into the household and beyond. And the best illustration I can think of, and I acknowledge all illustrations break down at some point, of course. So if you find a hole in this illustration, I'm just going to say, I'm aware of it, okay? I'm just saying this is the best one I can think of when it comes to all of this is a sports team, okay? Where you got the team on the field and you got the team captain, and the team captain's getting his orders from the coach on the sidelines. Head coach is not on the field. Head coach is on the sidelines telling the team captain, so the team captain can in turn let the team know what the head coach said, create the culture to go in the same direction together. And the team captain is not the most athletic necessarily. They are not the most skilled, but their job is simply the point person that the head coach is designated to help everyone go in the same direction as a team. And I think it's like that with husbands. Husbands, y'all are the team captain. You're getting your orders from Jesus. You're submitting your orders from Jesus. Everything is coming from Jesus, and you're telling the family, this is the direction we're going. And wives, a lot of times I think, and I find this to be true in my household, wives are almost like they're the all-star player on the team. It's not like the team captain's the all-star player. The team captain's just getting his word from the head coach. But then he needs an all-star player. If you were to ask my family, who's the all-star player in your family, I would say instantly, oh, it's my wife, man. No doubt. She's doing windmill slam dunks every single day. It's insane. And it's like that in the household. The husband is not the head coach who just tells everyone what to do because that's what he wants to do. He is the team captain who helps the whole team implement what the head coach said needs to happen, setting the culture, taking the responsibility and the leadership, getting everyone on the same team, pulling in the same direction together. Like I said, it's not a perfect illustration. There is no such thing. But I'm just saying, this is the best one I could come up with. Thank you. But when that happens, when we're stepping into our God-given roles to bring heaven down to earth, we're bringing that into our homes, going in the same direction together. And Paul pivots this into parenting as well, starting in verse 20. He says, children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Once again, Paul is elevating people back to the image of God. He's saying children are image bearers too. They're not less than, like the empire says. They are image bearers, and they're called to obey mom and dad as mom and dad help lead their family, going in the same direction, bringing the Garden of Eden into the home. So mom and dad, don't be harsh with them, but also don't go so far on the other side that you're passive with them, but call them to obey you as you obeyed Jesus. Call them to honor you as the authority in the home who wants what's best for them. That's the vision Paul is calling them into creating this Genesis 1 idea into the home. Many people, I would stand to guess, 2,000 years ago did not like a verse like this. And I would stand to guess now in America in 2023, people don't like a verse like this either. It's controversial. It still steps on toes, but for different reasons. Because back then, the main idea was power. Power led to family disintegration and breakdown. But for now, for us, 2,000 years, I would say, man, the main value we really hold is individual freedom. Individual freedom is the ultimate value, but even that leads to family breakdown and family disintegration. Because think about it. If ultimate freedom is ultimately the value we need to chase after, then marriage, generally speaking, is not about someone else. It's about me. What is it about? Can I be fulfilled in this? Can my needs be met? Because that's ultimately what it's about. I want to be the most free to do the most. And does marriage accomplish that? If so, great. But the moment my marriage is not about me, the moment my marriage gets tough, the moment my marriage is not fulfilling me, then I'm out. And it leads to breakdown and disintegration. I was driving home from Charlotte a couple weeks ago, and I saw a billboard on the highway. It said, "Life is short, get a divorce." And I remember thinking that, and I'm driving, and I thought, first of all, well, that's going in a sermon somewhere. But second, I thought, man, if individual freedom is like the ultimate value, then as abrasive as that statement sounds, that makes a lot of sense, right? And yet, in an age where individual freedom is of the utmost value, it's no wonder the divorce rates in America is the third highest in the world. According to the latest U.S. Census, 18.5 million children grow up without fathers, number one in the world. Individual freedom leads to family breakdown. This applies in similar ways to how we view parenting, because many would say if ultimate freedom is what's important, my role as a parent is to make sure my child grows up to express themselves as an individual, to pursue maximum happiness, and to give them as many options as possible so that they can discover their life's potential. So whatever the community says, whether mom and dad says or the community says, it's ultimately irrelevant. It's what does the child want? Because they're the ultimate ones to decide their path. And yet, in an age where our job is to ensure all of this, I read somewhere that it's between 93 and 95% of all the time you will spend in person with your child will happen before they turn 18. The final 5 to 7% you spend in person with your child will be stretched over the last 50 years after they leave the home. And I heard that, and it's like, well, they might get married, they have jobs, like they're going to do their own thing, but I can't help but wonder, man, if individual freedom is the ultimate thing, then of course it makes sense why families are so scattered from each other, where it used to be like a village and people were, generally speaking, close to each other to help and support each other. If freedom is the ultimate value, then we're all scattered and we're lonelier than ever because you've been fed that ultimate freedom is the goal. And it leads to disintegration in your soul and in our homes and in our communities. And it's a far cry from what God had in mind in Genesis 1. For some of us, I don't have to share those statistics to convince you of this. Maybe this reality of broken families and broken homes is what you've lived in. And you feel the weight and the heartbreak of it all. And the good news is God is broken over it too. Jesus is with you, and through his Spirit, he's doing something about it by bringing you and drawing you together into this forever family. That no matter your background, no matter your family status, through faith in Jesus, you are brought into the family of God, and nothing can separate you from that or break you apart from this forever family. You are here. And not only that, he is in the process by the power of the Holy Spirit of reversing generational sin. The good news is in the gospel, you are no longer defined by your past. You're not defined by your broken home. You are defined by Jesus. And you, through the power of the Holy Spirit, can start a new legacy to bring on new generations, starting with you, of people who love Jesus and want to pursue Jesus together as a family. So knowing this, that we've been redeemed by God the Father through his Son in the power of the Spirit, how can we step into this Genesis 1 idea to be on the same team, going after this vision in our homes? I got 3 things for us. Number 1, just got to assess where we are. If I wanted to keep with that illustration, I would say we got to huddle up. But I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say assess where we are, but huddle up. So husbands, wives, have honest conversations with each other. Are y'all functionally living on the same team? Are you living into your God-given role, or are you distorting what God has called you into? To ask yourselves, have the blunt, honest questions. What are we building? What direction are we going in? Are we building into this Genesis 1 vision, or are we building into something else? Even thinking about those stats I shared earlier, where there's patterns and breakdowns. Were you brought up in a certain home that impacts how you're viewing your home and how you relate to your family? If so, talk about it. Get on the same page with each other. If there's sin between y'all, talk about it. To be on the same team, to go in the same direction together. Second thing I have for us is establish family rhythms and traditions. If I was doing the same illustration, I would say you got to huddle up, you got to create a game plan, okay? Taking the practices of this is how I am following Jesus, and this is how we are following Jesus, to get it into the home. This is something we do together, building rhythms into the home that shape us, to form us, to look like a Genesis 1, Jesus-following family. And telling our kids, this is why we're doing these things. I think about Deuteronomy 6. It's one of my favorite chapters when it comes to raising families, where God says, because of what I've done for you, I want you to talk about my word in your home. And I want you to recite it, and I want you to memorize it, and I want you to sing it. I want you to have it written on your walls, that as you're walking through the day, I want you talking about it. And as you fall asleep at night, I want you thinking about my word. And then in Deuteronomy 6:20, it says, so that when your kids ask you, why do we do these things? For you to say, because the Lord our God has saved us. It's this idea of we are doing these things and we're telling our kids, this is why we do these things. It's for your good. It's for my good, so that we can do this together in following Jesus. So we prioritize kids, we prioritize life groups, we prioritize coming to church on Sundays because mom and dad need Jesus. He is the best thing ever, and I want that for you too. And I forget that. Mom and dad, we forget that. We need help, so we need to get around other people who love Jesus, and that's why we come on Sundays, and that's why we are in a hurry most Sunday mornings to get you dressed, to get you fed, to get to church on time, because we all need Jesus, and so we're going to prioritize that in our home. This is why meal times, bedtimes, the thing with creating family rhythms is y'all are probably already doing that. I'm just saying, put some Godward intentionality behind it. Y'all are sharing meals together. To use that time to be intentional, to form our family, to put the screens away, to make eye contact with your kids, to say, how have you been? What's hard? What's good right now? To open up the Bible, to pick a psalm, to just read it out loud and say, how's this hit you? What's this teaching you? Because this is what it's teaching me. At bedtimes, to pray together, to talk about God's goodness together. What can we be thankful for together? To sing over them. A day or two doesn't necessarily form them, but man, 18 years of doing that day in and day out, that's going to shape them into something really beautiful that I want for us. Third thing I have for us is invite others in. Invite others in. So I would say, huddle up, create a game plan, recruit. But again, that's just a thought. Like it takes a village to raise a child, so it takes a church family to build strong families in the home. The temptation is to silo off our lives. It's like we can be friends, we can hang out, we can do life together, but when it comes to what I'm doing under my roof, man, that's my stuff, so you can't be a part of that. But that's not how it works in the family of God. That's not how it works at all. So married couples, you need people from all seasons of life in our church to help, encourage, and speak into you. And vice versa, you need to do that for others. Singles, we need you to challenge the married folks in our church like Paul, to recruit yourself, to find some families in our church and get on their team. To maybe just be very intentional, to invite yourself over. I guarantee you, singles, if you're walk up to a married couple with kids, you're like, hey, can I invite myself over for a meal sometime this week? I will have the food. You just let me know when. I guarantee you, parents are going to be like, can you come over right now? What are you doing right now? Come on, let's figure this out. I know some of the folks, even in downtown, it's like, I know of single folks who are dubbed uncles and aunts in this family because they're just being so intentional, just inviting themselves in to where even my kids have an aunt in our church family who's single, and it's just she's just part of our family. She's just in our house all the time, and it's beautiful, and I love it. We need each other to do this. We need God's word and the power of the Spirit to live into this church family, building families in the church. This is how Ephesians 5 talks about it, which we read at the beginning. It says, no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it as Christ does the church, because we, all of us, we are members of his body. And And it cites Genesis 2, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I'm saying it refers to Christ and the church. In other words, marriage and family are not the ultimate goal in the kingdom of God. Marriage was a symbol of something deeper. It was a mystery for so long, and now that mystery has been revealed, and that mystery is it's about Jesus. Jesus is the goal, and the beauty is anyone can get in on this. Single, married, divorced, remarried, solid home, broken home, children of divorced parents or not. The mystery is revealed that Jesus is King, and He is what our hearts long for, and He's what our hearts need. And if you want to know what it means to be a member of the family of God, you look to Jesus, who through His life and death and resurrection humbly led and submitted Himself and obeyed in every way to God the Father, so that we might walk in newness of life, so that we might get more of heaven into us and in our homes and beyond. And this is what He is calling us to now, church, to step into this life, to step into this garden life that can flourish in our homes and in our church family and beyond, to be this light on a hill. This is what He's calling us into. So church, let us step into that. Will you pray with me, please?